My first mistake was not deleting the recording of a child's laughter found inside that abandoned hospital. If you dare, read the whole hospital story to the end. The headphones still had a strange grinding sound of metal wheels, as if an old wheelchair was scratching the hospital floor. But in front of me, the dark corridor was completely empty. There were no wheelchairs, no shadows of people, just dried bloodstains on the floor and a single dim light in the distance, just like someone's eyes. I didn't understand that wasn't really the beginning. That was the return, from which I never returned. Today, we will listen to a story that will make your heart skip a beat. We were also shocked when we heard the story for the first time. Who will dare to watch this scary story till the end? Let us know in the comment box. Let's start today's story, which started from a hospital. My name is Nafi Sadman. Everyone calls me Naf now. A somewhat renowned sound designer from Dhaka, who is no match for me when it comes to creating realistic sound for horror movies. Directors say, "You create fear with sound." I laugh it off, but deep down I know most of what I make is stolen. From reality, from dead places. I take my recorder to places where people no longer walk normally. Old factories, dilapidated school buildings, cemeteries, houses on the banks of the river that have been eroded. These are my studios, but this time it's different. This time I've come to the hospital where my sister is. A huge 5-story building on the outskirts of the city. An old government mental and children's hospital. Mirpur Model Psychiatric and Child Care Institute. Now everyone just calls me by its name, the Old Mental Hospital. It was suddenly closed after an incident 10 years ago. Government news, budget crisis, staff shortage. Another thing on people's lips. Unusual deaths of patients, missing children, strange tests by doctors in the operating theater at night, and that fire last night. That night, my 6-year-old sister Tasneem was admitted here. It was as if my parents had aged in one night. The files were lost and the CCTV footage had been erased. We only got an official and short death certificate. Cardiac arrest. Nothing else. The excuse for the work came from director Rudra. He was making a new film, a psychological horror. He had decided on the title Hospital Silent. He wanted me to work with the audio of an actual abandoned hospital. In his words, "Let it not be a film. Let the sound be real." A dark desire hidden somewhere inside me also raised its head. Could I hear something from Tasneem's hospital? A broken file? An old tape? Some carelessness left behind? That's why I came here tonight. Not alone, but with a small team of 4. It was about 10:30 p.m. when the driver's battered microbus stopped in front of the hospital gate. Half of the letters of the hospital's name had been blown off the rusty iron frames on both sides of the gate. In the distance, the building lay on the ground like a dead animal. All the windows were dark, some glass was broken, and here and there something like cloth was fluttering. As soon as I got out, the cold air went straight into my throat. Strangely, standing here in this hot November city, it felt like the last night of winter. Mahi, our unit sound assistant, was the first to get off the microbus. He wore thick-framed glasses and a boom mic in his hand. As he stumbled a little, he said, "Dude, was the plan to come here really a good idea?" I replied dryly, "Don't worry, you won't spend the night here. We'll record some raw sound. It's better to go to the basement, and then we'll go for a round." The person sitting on the other side slowly got out. Uncle Tawfik, the former security guard at the hospital, now a tea vendor at the night bus stand. Rudra had bought him, that is, by handing him some money. He said there was no way he could enter without permission, and the guards were happier to hear stories than bribes on an empty stomach. Uncle Tawfik's eyes were dark. The folds of his face were covered with smoke from the old days, sweat, and some unspoken nightmares. Finally, Rudra himself got out of the microbus, camera in hand, but today he would mainly draw visual references. The actual shooting would happen later. There was a strange excitement on his face, as if we had come to a theme park rather than a ghost hospital. Wow, did you see that? Absolutely cinematic. Look at that dim light. natural spotlight. In the distance, a floodlight hung from a half-broken holder, flickering on and off strangely, not in the air, but in a rhythm of its own. As I stared, I thought I could see someone's shadow flickering, tall, thin, wearing a white coat. But every time the light went out and came back on, no one was there. I cleared my throat, as if to come out of my own mind. They all said the hospital had been empty for 10 years, but in my headphones, someone was still whispering, "Take another cut," from the operating theater. Whatever was inside, I would have to capture it as sound today. But I didn't know one thing at the time. All the sounds I had recorded since that night would no longer be recognizable. The night the fire broke out, all the clocks had stopped. Tonight, the ticking of those clocks had been recorded again, only there was no one in the hospital. The gate was written in large letters, no entry, but someone had written another line below in dried blood. Once in, you will never hear the sound of leaving again. The gate hung from the outside, unlocked. Only one thing stopped us from entering, a strange smell coming from inside. The strong smell of old disinfectant, mixed with the damp floor, the closed room, and the dust that had not been swept for a long time. There was something else that I didn't understand at first, a wrinkled memory of a smell like gently burning flesh, which, as soon as it hit my nose, immediately pulled me back to that night 10 years ago. The fire truck parked in front of the hospital, and the smoke coming out of it, and my mother's hysterical screams in the distance. As Uncle Tufik pushed the gate open and entered, the gate made a faint metallic clang. The sound seemed to return to our ears in the surrounding darkness, doubling in size. I turned on the recorder, checked the boom mic level, put my headphones up, and listened for a moment. Just silence, a few distant dog barks, and the gentle breeze. First the ground floor, I said. Main corridor, then to the operating theater. The inner door, once glass, was now half broken, half hanging, covered with paper notices. Staff only, Ward No. 3, danger, high voltage. The topmost notice was much newer, clearer than all the other papers. No entry. As I slowly pushed past it, a chill that had built up over the years seemed to come out and hit us. The hospital's main corridor. The corridor that had once been walked by patients, doctors, nurses, and countless children like Tasneem, now stretched like a wrinkled dead river. A few fluorescent tubes from the ceiling were half broken, occasionally flickering. Most of them are off. Most of the corridors are plunged into darkness. There are patches of fungus on the walls, warning posters, cartoonish diagrams teaching the correct use of injections, and names with ink rubbed off in small handwriting. Children's drawings. Mehi whispered, "Dude, why are these places so silent? Tell me, where do the people who were here before, their words, their tears, their laughter, all go?" I didn't answer directly. I just held the recorder up a little. Sometimes, even in the silence, there is a rumble from very low floors, which is not audible to everyone, but can be picked up by a microphone. Listening very carefully through the headphones, I suddenly found it in a gap. A distant, very distant tick-tick-tick, as if a clock hanging somewhere inside the walls of the old hospital was still silently doing its job. But from one end of the corridor, I couldn't see any clock. "Do you hear it?" I whispered. Mehi shook her head. "Like a clock." Uncle Tufik paused. "All the clocks here have stopped long ago. No one has set them after the night of the fire." I looked at him. "But the word..." He paused for a moment, controlling the tremor in his throat, and said, "That's not the time. That's memory." My body trembled slightly. I know that the human brain makes up meanings for many words that don't actually exist. I rely on logic, but today, coming here, my logic seems to be retreating little by little. Even though my throat was dry, I managed to say, "Uncle, let's take a look around this floor first. Where are the operating theaters?" "On the left in front," Uncle Tufik said. "But first, check one thing. There's a ward where..." He didn't finish speaking. He just raised his hand and pointed to a broken door a little further to the right of the corridor. I didn't know then that very ward would make me hear Tasneem's laughter. The swing was swinging on its own, the chain was crying. And through the headphones I could clearly hear the children calling my microphone by name, not me. Chapter 3. Broken ward and the voice of a child. As we walked down the corridor to the right, we realized that this part was even more dilapidated than the rest of the hospital. Large pieces of plaster from the ceiling were falling to the floor, and in places the mosaic floor had been lifted, exposing the concrete below. The air mixed with the dust was the smell of old medicines, sulfur, alcohol, and dried cough syrup. The door to the ward had once been covered in glass, but now most of the glass was broken, with only a few holes in the frame. Above it, a rusty steel plate read, "Pediatric Ward B." Something inside me broke. The ward where Tasneem was kept was also B. The similarity might have been a coincidence, but it still made a strange, muffled sound in my mind. Rudra stepped forward a little, peered through the glass, and turned on the camera. "Wow," he whispered. "Look what an art direction time has prepared. These broken beds, hanging curtains, amazing." Before entering, I turned up the volume a little more, keeping the recorder on so as not to miss even the faintest sound. As soon as I stepped into the ward, something dry and sticky broke from the floor. Maybe the plastic of an old syringe, maybe a small piece of glass. Rows of iron beds, most of them without mattresses, some with brown spots on them. I looked away, thinking bold water stains, nothing more. On one side of the ward, colorful, faded curtains, flower prints still hung. The curtains seemed to sway slowly with the slightest movement of the wind. As I moved one curtain with my hand, I realized that there was no window open here, no air circulation. Yet a cold current was coming from somewhere. I stood there, listening intently through my headphones. Mahi moved the boom mic towards the screen. At first, there was only silence. Then very slowly, very low, ting, 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 as if a key on a toy piano was being played repeatedly. The sound was so faint that I was sure it must be some memory in my head. I remembered Tasneem's little orange toy piano, the one I used to play only once. I would always press the same key to play a melodious tune, and she would laugh and roll over. "Can you hear me?" I whispered. Mahi shook her head after a while, her eyes wide. "Where are you coming from? There's nothing here." Rudra took control of the frame and started panning the camera towards the gap in the screen, the broken bed, and the floor. Uncle Tawfik was standing near the door, not making any move to come in. When I looked at him, he looked away. "Uncle," I called out. "What in this ward?" He suddenly said sternly, "Come out first. It's not good to stand here for long." "Why?" Rudra said with a laugh. "Did you see a ghost?" Uncle Tawfik was silent for a moment and then slowly said, "No ghosts. There are children." The tremor in his voice made me no longer want to make fun of him. At that moment I heard clearly through the headphones a very soft, crackling laugh, so faint, as if it was coming from somewhere far away, behind three walls. Before I could fall silent, Mahdi whispered from behind, "Dude." Someone laughed, just like a child. My chest froze completely. I quickly looked at the recording time code and made a mental note. I would have to go to the studio and listen to this part separately later. I controlled myself and said as naturally as possible, "Come on, let's go to the operating theater first. I'll come back here later." But as I turned towards the door, I noticed a small object hanging next to the bed in a corner of the ward. Hanging from a string in front of the bag was a faded orange plastic, small, white keyboard with a picture of it. A toy piano keychain. I stopped my feet, suppressed the gasp in my throat, and slowly walked towards it. It was so old that the plastic was stained yellow, yet there was still a faint scratch on one of the keys in the cracked white paint, just like the scratch on one of the keys on Tasneem's toy piano, because I always pressed that same key. If this entire hospital had really been empty for 10 years, how could this toy piano still be hanging here? Chapter 4. The white silence of the operation theater. As soon as we left the pediatric ward, it seemed that the sounds in the corridor had changed a little. A strange bubbling sound had been added to the previous silence. as if someone's breathing had been recorded very close to a microphone somewhere far away. I kept explaining to myself over and over again, interference in the microphone cable, or air pressure in the pipeline inside the building. But the hairs on my body were standing on end, so no amount of logic was working. Uncle Tufik didn't want to come here. Finally, after much persuasion, he agreed to take us to the operating theater. They were just a turn to the left of the corridor. The walls were somewhat clean. It seemed as if someone had started repainting this part before the fire. The work was not finished. Some of the doors still had names written on them: Surgery 1, Surgery 2, Observation Room. Dust on the handle, rust on the body. I pushed the door of the first surgery room and went inside. The tube lights were all broken, and only the moonlight was filtering in through the small window next to the door through the gap in the wet glass. In the middle of the room was a large operating table, surrounded by stainless steel trolleys, on which were scattered some medical instruments: forceps, scissors, injection holders, things I don't know the names of. There were only a few colored spots on everything. Were they rust? Or... I didn't think about it anymore. Mahi held the boom mic slightly up. I placed the recorder on the operating table, as if any slight vibration passing over the table would be captured. Rudra slowly started moving around the room with the camera. He really liked the contrast of hard light and deep shadow in the frame, I know. Uncle Tufik stood near the door and whispered, "A child died in this room." Everyone said the operation was going well for 2 hours. Then suddenly all the equipment broke down together. The lights, the monitor, the anesthesia machine, everything went off. And the child's eyes, no one can forget. "How many years ago?" I asked. "The week before the fire." He looked away. Even if I had a job after this room, I wouldn't have come on the night shift anymore. I went on the day shift. Inside the room, only the sound of our footsteps, the light swish of the microphone rubbing against the cloth, and my breathing mixed to create a tense silence. I listened to my headphones. At first, nothing. Then from somewhere far away, the grinding of wheels, the sound of a wheelchair moving across the long corridor. I raised my hand, signaling everyone to stop. The sound was getting closer and closer. From the corridor, tick, tick, click, the wheels bounced over the broken tiles, sometimes slowly, sometimes a little faster. My heart rate seemed to increase in sync with the sound. I stood there holding my breath in my headphones. Rudra walked towards the door with the camera and peered into the corridor through the gap. Its playback indicator light was flickering. "No one," Rudra whispered. "Empty corridor." But the sound stopped right in front of our door. It seemed like a wheelchair was standing right on the other side of the door. The wheels were rocking. Then very slowly, chee, something seemed to hit right next to the door. Uncle Tufik's face turned white. Mahi was holding the boom mic so tightly that the veins in his hand were bulging. Suddenly, the sound stopped. Then the boom mic picked up a trembling sound, a very light, wet whisper: "Push. Push again." It was undoubtedly a woman's voice. "Doctor? Nurse?" There was no life, no emotion in the voice, just the deadness of a professional command. I knew it well. I had heard this posture countless times on the shooting floor when directors gave instructions to actors. But this sound was different. The echo of an order stuck to a dead white wall. "Can you hear me?" My throat trembled. Mahi looked at me with wide eyes. Her lips were dry. She nodded slightly in response. Rudra now took the camera and walked out the door before I could stop him. The corridor was completely empty. But on the floor, right in front of the door, there was a long parallel mark, as if something had been pushed through it repeatedly. The end of the mark had disappeared into the darkness. There was no light in the distance. "The shot is amazing," Rudra whispered. "Shall we move on?" I took off my headphones, hung them around my neck, and took a deep breath. I slowly returned to logic. All the sounds would be captured here on my device. Later, sitting in the light of the editing room, I could hold each frequency and open it to see what was real. How much was real? How much was interference? I believed in my work. Even in the midst of fear, that professionalism was a strange drug. "Yes," I said. "You show me the stairwell, Uncle. The ground floor and basement are essential." Uncle Tufik paused, a glimmer of panic in his eyes. "Are you going to the basement?" "It would be a lot of work if you could record there," I said, lowering my eyes. "Only audio. I won't be there long." He slowly shook his head. Back then, there was a doctor's office downstairs, and a file room. Many files. That's what all the trouble is about. "What files?" I understood from the question. Hoping to get all the answers by tonight was probably foolish. I asked anyway. Some tests were being conducted here without permission, Uncle Tufik said. His eyes were elsewhere now. "It doesn't come to my face, but you'll understand when you go downstairs." At that moment, the recorder next to the operating table shook slightly, as if someone had poked the table with an invisible finger. I rushed over and picked up the recorder. Somehow, the file name had changed by itself, from REC001 to REC001_TASNINM. My hands were shaking and getting cold. Chapter 5, The Swing of the Children's Ward. Before going down to the basement, Uncle Tufik sat down stubbornly. "Why don't you go around the upper part a little more, sir? You can go down. First, come and see the children's ward. Many people say that it all started from there. Is there another pediatric ward?" I was surprised. "Yes," he said slowly. There was a separate block for high-risk cases, children with mental problems, on whom special therapy was given. Some people said that the therapy was actually an experiment. Old news headlines woven somewhere in my mind flashed, "Child missing in hospital, medical negligence," or something else. But they never even appeared as full news. Everything seemed to have suddenly stopped on the night of the fire. We now started walking towards another wing of the hospital. This corridor was very dark. Only a tube light was on in the middle. It was also flickering. As I walked under the tube lights, I thought that once the light went out, no one would see me anymore. Only the sound of my footsteps would be heard fading away. As soon as I turned the corner to the right, I saw the ward. The sign above the door said, "Behavioral Therapy. Children." The door paneling had almost lifted, and the wood was exposed. The darkness inside was so thick that when I pushed the door, only darkness was visible. I put on my headphones and went inside, as if to check it out with sound first. The first thing I realized inside was there was no sound in this room. Not a single one. Even the sound of my own breathing seemed to be a little distant in a separate room. This was very unusual. Usually, in any enclosed space, even a slight bit of humidity in the air, reflections on the walls, and the creaking of the floor would be audible. But here, nothing. It's called a dead room. Some recording rooms inside studios are completely soundproofed. But who would soundproof a hospital ward? Why? As Rudra turned on the flashlight on his mobile phone, the room suddenly appeared before us. The walls were smooth with no posters on them. A few small iron beds in the middle, and a few chairs on each side. In one corner, a small room like an iron cage, with a small child's bed inside and a wooden seat like a small swing hanging from the ceiling, tied to a scissor-shaped chain. I had never seen such a strange construction in my life. Mahi very slowly pointed the boom at the swing. I still hadn't heard any sound. Then the swing moved very slightly. An inch, 2 inches, then a little more, as if someone had pushed it with an invisible hand. The air inside the cage was stirring, but the rest of the room was still. A light, drawn-out key sound came from the friction of the chain and the iron frame. The microphone picked up the sound so clearly that it was as if I had put my ear to the metal. Very low down, another sound began to come along with the sound of the swing. The whispers of children. Small sentences, indistinct as if I were hearing them from underwater. "Mom, don't leave me. The doctor is coming. The sound will be on again today." The words were so faint that I was sure that no one among us except Mahi, and I could hear them properly. As soon as he looked at me, I motioned with my eyes, "Record it." Rudra started walking around the cage with the camera, the light from his flashlight stretching the shadow of the swing along the wall, distorting it strangely. Uncle Tufik was standing in a corner, his eyes downcast, whispering prayers. I went up to him and asked, "What room was this, anyway?" He lowered his voice and said, "Here, those who screamed the most cried the most, and ran the most. They were kept apart." The doctors had introduced a new therapy, sound therapy, or that you can change the patient's behavior by listening to certain sounds. Headphones in the children's ears, sound speakers around. The experiment went on day after day. Many people said that they were actually conducting experiments on the brain with both drugs and sound. Which doctor? I lowered my voice even more. Dr. Seema Islam, he said. Very smart, studied abroad. Everyone respected her a lot. One day, she suddenly disappeared. No one knew where she went. She hadn't even been here a single night before the fire. I struggled to keep my voice steady and said, "Her file?" "In the basement," Uncle Tufik said. "Maybe it's still in the file room. No one has looked." At that very moment, the swing swung very hard on its own, from the very front to the back, as if someone had pushed it hard. The sound of the chain hitting the chain became sharp, as if it was cutting off my ears. The boom mic's output turned red. I quickly turned down the level, and my hand shook. The air in the room became thick, as if someone was squeezing my throat. And then, for the first time, I heard my own name whispered. Nafiz. The word was coming from the cradle, not from the whispers of the children, or from between the walls. I couldn't understand it. But the name was absolutely clear. Another child's voice joined it. "Bay, are you coming?" I took off my headphones, as if I could cut off the sound. But the sound had entered my brain. Maggie looked at me and said in a trembling voice, "Who said your name?" I couldn't answer. Only one thing was clear. This hospital doesn't just retain words, it retains names too. Chapter 6. Stairs, Shadows, and Descending to the Ground Floor. After we left the swing room, we were all silent for a few moments. The air in the corridor seemed to have become a little heavy. Rudra spoke first. "Look, I agree that there are psychological effects, but if the audio footage is clear, we can do something serious with this movie." "You're thinking about movies. I'm thinking about how long we'll be safe here," Mahdi said seriously. "My head is spinning after hearing about the sound therapy experiments. How could these doctors do this?" I remained silent. One link after another was forming in my head. Tasneem's behavioral problems, the doctor's suspicious referrals, the suddenly changed reports on the night of the fire, and now this Dr. Seema Islam. If their files were really in the basement, then coming to this hospital might not have been a sudden act, but rather the result of a long-held secret desire. "Uncle, where is the staircase?" I finally said. At the end of the ground floor, there was an emergency staircase that led to the rooftop on one side and the basement on the other. As we started walking towards it, the air temperature in the corridor seemed to drop a little. The walls were even more damp, and the spots of fungus were thick. There were practically no lights. Only a weak bulb was burning at the top of the stairs, as if it was dying to shed some light. The first sound I noticed as I walked towards the stairs was the sound of a slowly increasing breath, as if someone had been running for a long time and was sitting on the stairs panting. The sound was so real that I instinctively looked towards the middle of the stairs. No one was there. Still, the sound was coming from there, perfectly clear on the headphones. I lowered the volume a little so as not to be too affected myself. Rudra smiled lightly and said, "Did you notice the reverb? The natural echo on the stairs is great. You can take it as a reference for the dialogue folio." I looked at his face and thought, maybe that's our difference. He seeks ghosts in frames and lights, I in the darkness of words. Neither of us understands the full extent of the truly dense darkness. The stairs shook a little as we took the first step. The old dust and dry plaster on the concrete made a crunching sound. Mehdi held up the boom mic. I bent down a little and placed a small ambient recorder on the stairs, which would continue to play along with us. Uncle Tufik stood at the top of the stairs, looking down strangely. There was a hesitation in his eyes, as if he couldn't decide whether to go down or not. "Aren't you going down?" I asked. "I will," he said slowly. "But let me tell you one thing. If someone starts calling your name when you go down, please, don't answer. Don't even look back." A cold current began to run through me. "Why?" "Because they're not always human," he said, lowering his eyes. "And those who answer return, but not as before." None of us laughed. Although this dialogue sounds like a line from a movie, today it is not written from a professional script, a warning from a living experience. We slowly started to descend the stairs. The light above quickly became smaller and became like a distant point of fire. The lower we went, the darker, the colder it became. When you put your hand on the wall, it was wet and cold. When you stand at the corners of the stairs, it seems that someone is looking straight down from below, but you can't see. And the sound of breathing increased until it suddenly became suffocating. As if someone was pulling a rope around your neck, unable to breathe. Then, a crunching sound as if your body was releasing itself from the rope. My heart was almost in my throat. I wanted to take off my headphones and throw them away, but professional instinct stopped me. These are the sounds of my job. When I came to a corner, I suddenly stopped. A small aluminum signboard hung on the front wall. "Basement. File room / lab / service tunnel." And just below it, in English, handwritten with scissors on the wall, "Dionanti Elisin." Marty said in a low voice, "Dude, can I tell you something?" "What exactly are we doing?" I didn't answer, because I didn't know either. Chapter 7, Basement, Files, Labs, and Forbidden Recordings. The first thing that hit us upon reaching the basement was the smell of damp, rotting paper. No one had entered here for a long time. Everything was locked up. The only light was the torch from our mobile phone and a small LED panel. The corridor was very low, with pipes and wires on the ceiling. Shelves lined the walls, paper cartons, and file boxes. The door to the first file room had the words, "Audit/admin." Leaving that aside, we went straight to the end, where Uncle Tufik pointed, a white plate written on it, "Research Archive/confidential." The door was semi-open, not completely closed, after someone had hurried out once. As soon as we pushed in, we saw only files, mountains of files in front of our eyes. The files were arranged like a library on steel shelves, with names and codes on the backs. The air was so full of dust that the light made the fine particles fall like rain. I turned on the recorder and placed it in the middle of the shelf, as if I could catch the movement of paper, the faint sound of human hands moving. The fear subsided a little when I could immerse myself in the work. Where could Dr. Seema Islam's file be? I asked my uncle. He was squinting, reading the labels on each shelf. "There are separate sections for doctors here," he said after a while. Our little flashlights flickered, and we reached the last row. There was a doctor's name tag on one shelf, Imtiaz/Rubayat/Seema/Mahmud. My chest felt a jolt, as if someone had pushed me from inside. I reached out and pulled out the files in the middle of the shelf with the tag Seema. The first file had bold letters, Dr. Seema Islam, Sound Response Therapy, Child Patient. Opening the folder and peering inside, I saw a pile of reports, tables, graphs, and audio cassette cases. Each one had session_01, session_02, and the patient codes written in small letters, T14, M09, and 07. My eyes were caught by one code, 12. The handwritten name on the file, Tasnim Sadman. The dryness in my throat seemed to increase, and my vision blurred a little. For 10 years I have been searching for an answer. What exactly did this hospital do to my sister? Her mental changes, her unexplained cries, her screaming at night. They are letting me hear again. Brother, we're all just part of the disease, or was someone deliberately doing something to her? Please, open the file and see. My own voice sounded unfamiliar to my ears. Mahi and Rudra stood silently, Tawfik uncle lowering his eyes. As I opened the file with trembling hands, the first thing I saw were reports, audio stimulus, patient response, increased fear response to high-frequency tones, paralysis/mute response to low-frequency drones, increased crying in child voice samples, suicidal tendencies, and a line at the end of the file that stood out from all the other reports. Note: patient T12 sometimes reacts to inaudible sounds. He claims that the hospital speaks for itself. His voice cannot be heard by others. It makes sense to continue the experiment, as it can be connected to the main purpose of the neuro-auditory project. My fingers closed on the paper. Neuro-auditory project. So this whole sound therapy is not actually psychological, but an attempt to reprogram the brain with sound. Stapled to the last page of the file was a small audio cassette cover. It read, T12, final session, emergency record. Another jolt in my chest. Where is it? I almost shouted. Uncle Tufik took out the tape case from inside the file cabinet. It was old and black. As soon as I picked up the case, I felt that the weight inside it was heavier than the paper, as if something was stuck inside. Rudra whispered, "Do you want to play this now?" There was only one thing on my mind at that time. Tasneem's last record. I slowly said, "Yes, now." And just then several footsteps sounded simultaneously in the corridor outside the file room, small, bare feet running. They passed each other across the corridor and stopped directly in front of our door. Chapter 8. Sound, tape, and the call of the dead. No one asked who was outside. Everyone understood without interruption that the four of us were standing in one place. And there were no lights in the corridor, no staff, no children. Yet the sound of footsteps was so clear, as if dust was flying on the ground right outside the door. "Did you hear?" Mahdi whispered hoarsely. My throat was dry. I have headphones on, so the sound is like it's inside my head. From the other side of the door, someone very slowly reached out and ran a finger along the door frame, a squeaking sound. Then a very small, thin voice. "Auntie, why did you turn off the light?" Another voice. "Will we have to hear that sound again today?" A third voice, very low, scratchy. "Shut up. The doctor is coming." Uncle Tufik suddenly increased the pace of his whispered prayer. Rudra is standing with the camera pointed at the door. But there are no figures in the frame, only an empty dark corridor. Yet the sounds are clear, as if someone is pulling a chair to sit down, small backs rubbing against the wall. "Should we play the tape or go up first?" Mahdi said in a trembling voice. I took the cassette in my hand and wondered, will we actually be safe going upstairs? With the hospitals past, it seems that all dangers are within the sound. In the upper ward, in the operation theater, on the stairs, sound has followed us everywhere. If this tape is really Tasneem's last session, then I will not leave here before listening to it. "I will play it," I said quietly, and hearing that quiet voice made me realize how broken I was inside. I have a cassette player attachment to my recorder. Small, in the bag. I'm taking it out now. My hands were shaking as I took the small cassette adapter out of the bag. Still out of habit, I set it up properly. The moment I opened the cassette case and inserted the tape, there was a very strange sound, as if I had opened a door to a long-closed alley. A light, dry crack. Rudra and Mahi were looking at me over their shoulders. Uncle Tawfik was standing with his face turned away from the file shelf, as if he had no acquaintance with this tape. I pressed the play button on the recorder. At first, there was static. Shh, shh, shh. The usual stale white noise of an old tape. Then slowly a voice emerged, a cold, controlled female voice. Session T12. Date. The date wasn't entirely clear on the tape, but the end. 2 days before the fire incident. Then the voice said, "Tasneem, can you hear me?" A small voice was heard from very close to the microphone. I have heard this 1,000 times in my life, at home, at school, in hospital beds, but hearing it on this tape felt like someone had put a hand in my throat and squeezed it. Tasneem's voice was filled with fear, fatigue, and a strange mental confusion. Dr. Sema's voice. I assume it was her voice was heard. Today we will hear a new sound. You said that at night, you hear some sounds that we cannot hear. Today, I will try to make a sound like that. You will tell me if it is similar to the sound you hear. Okay. Tasneem said very slowly, Can you come, brother? Something like an arrow pierced my chest. I was sitting outside in the hospital in a long corridor. Maybe they didn't let me in, or maybe I was scared and kept away. I don't remember exactly today. But I can hear him clearly on the tape. He's asking me about me. The doctor's voice is emotionless. No, just you and me. And a few more words. Try to listen carefully. If you're scared, tell me right away. Then a click, as if a machine was turning on. Then a few seconds of silence on the tape. Then the sound began, a strange vibrating drone. Very low frequencies, as if below the normal range of human hearing. Even so, the frequency has changed since it was recorded on tape. But one thing is still clear. The sound is not normal. There is no harmony, no pattern, just a constant vibration, as if some huge machine has started to operate somewhere far away. The sound entered the headphones and made my head spin. As a sound designer, I work with frequencies. Some are comfortable for the ear, some are painful, some are frightening. But this sound seemed to come from an unfamiliar region, outside of all those theories. Its sharpness has been reduced because it was recorded on a microphone. But one can imagine how terrifying it must have sounded to Tasneem's ears in reality. The doctor's voice on the tape. What are you feeling, Tasneem? Tasneem says nothing at first. Only her breathing quickens, a slight panic. Then he says very slowly, They are waking up. Who? The doctor's voice is still emotionless. The people inside the wall, Tasneem said. They used to just whisper. Now they'll scream. Something like a really faint whisper was added to the background of the tape. Well, was that really there? Or has the current whispering of this hospital mixed with my tape? My head is spinning, but I can't take my ears off the recorder in my hand. Suddenly, another sound was added to the tape. A distorted, high-frequency screech. It sounded like someone was getting too close to the microphone and rubbing metal. Tasneem cried out, Stop, stop. They're coming. They're saying, Don't leave me. Bring brother. The doctor's voice was a little harsh now. You're hallucinating, Tasneem. Focus. How's the sound? Here was the first abnormality in the tape. As soon as the doctor spoke, the whispering sounds in the background seemed to sync with the current whispering in this room. For a moment, I couldn't tell which was part of the tape and which was the voice circulating in the air of the current basement. The sounds are mixed. And then, a part of the tape suddenly becomes distorted. The sound seems to be so loud, the magnetic layer of the tape can't handle it. A roar is coming from inside in countless layers, countless voices together. Can you hear? Can you open our door? Don't stop the sound. It's not a single voice. Children, adults, men, women, all together, a mass. Tasneem is screaming. They're coming. They're saying, Light a fire. The fire will stop all the sounds. Brother, take me. Please. Tears are unknowingly rolling down my face. I can see my own childhood cowardice, my incompetence, everything in these words. Why didn't I come to get him? Why didn't I take him away from that examination room? The last part of the tape was almost completely ruined. Only once in the noise could the doctor's voice be heard. This time broken. Stop recording. This can't continue. The hospital is making its own noise. Then suddenly there was complete silence. The tape ended. The light click of the player. The silence in the basement corridor suddenly became heavier. None of us was talking. The silence itself had become sound. That light rustling, the shifting of the air under the bridge, the echo of something metal falling somewhere in the distance. Then, in the midst of that silence, a very clear, very familiar voice called my name. Nafis Bey. This is not a tape. This is now in this basement. Uncle Tufik whispered. I didn't say, if you go down, they'll call you by name. Choose the time to come back now. Chapter 9. Hospital Desire and Facing Truth. The voice is coming from the corridor. The sound of small footsteps, as if someone is standing in the darkness and then running away, and then standing again. Mehi squeezes my hand, her fingers cold as ice. Rudra moves towards the door with the camera, but this time his hand is also shaking. You can see it. Nafis Bey. He calls again, this time from a little closer, as if someone is standing right next to the door. You are late. I close my eyes. My mind is completely blank. If I run out now, maybe I will survive. Delete all these words from the drive, tear up the files, forget everything I have heard. But Tasneem, the truth of her last day, all the other voices trapped inside this hospital. I slowly, biting my lip, said, Tasneem, where are you? There was a choking sound in Tawfiq Chach's throat. I told you not to answer, but I answered. Does responding to a voice calling my name mean opening a door? Does it mean starting an experiment again? I don't know. All I know is that my voice is choked up, tears in my eyes. I've made a decision, the outcome of which will probably not be good. A faint flicker of light flickers from the darkness of the corridor, as if an old emergency light had turned on by itself. Below it, a small shadow in a hospital gown stands. The face is not clearly visible due to the distance, but it is childish in build, hair tied up, and arms hanging down. Behind it, many shadows line the walls of the corridor, metal trolleys, wheelchairs, pipes hanging from the ceiling, altogether a broken, tangled shadow. Brother, they want you to record, the small voice said. They've been waiting for a long time. No one hears their voices. Can you do it? Is that so? Mahdi said in a trembling voice, Is this your sister? I said nothing. I just moved forward a little. Strangely, even amidst the fear and depression, my professional curiosity was working. What exactly is this hospital? This they? Just the souls of the dead? Or is it the result of that experiment, an artificial entity made of a mixture of sounds and memories? The shadow said again, The doctors used to make sounds, didn't they? They would put all the sounds here together, put them inside our heads. Then they would enjoy watching. Now there is no doctor, but there are sounds. Then the voice changed, not just the child's this time, but deeper, mixed with many other voices. We are very alone, Nafis, the mass voice said. No one hears our voices. The doctors have left, leaving the files. You record the sounds. If you record us all, hold on to all our stories, we will be free. But what? I asked. Then these sounds will never be separate from you again, the voice replied. You will be a new body for us to hear. A new hospital. A moving basement. The recorder was almost falling from my hands. That means this entity, the collective sound consciousness of this hospital, needs a host. Someone who will carry it, record it, and deliver it to human ears. All my horror film work suddenly seemed so small and ridiculous. Have I been working for them all this time? One thing is clear, Rudra whispered softly, a strange mixture of fear and excitement in his voice. The ghost in this hospital is actually an entity made of sound. Dr. Sema probably awakened the entity while conducting neuro-auditory experiments in the name of audio therapy. By breaking the frequency, the limits of the human brain. This entity now wants to maintain its existence, and for that, it needs a host. Mahdi said in a trembling voice, And that's you. The voice seemed a little annoyed. You understand everything in the language of cinema. But we don't want a story. We just want to listen, just want to hear. Our words are stuck inside the walls, inside the tape, in the letters of the file. The childish voice that sounded like Tasneem's came out again separately. Brother, I've been waiting for you for a long time. They said you'll be fine. But if you leave, I'll never be able to get out again. My blood is boiling, burning in the back of my throat. What should I do? Record this entity completely, liberate Tasneem and the rest of the souls. That means my life will become a permanent basement. I'll hear these words night after night. This sound will permeate all my future work, and I'll never be able to hear anything normal again. And what if I refuse? Will the hospital let us go then? Will we be able to get out of here alive, or will the hospital trap us in its own walls with noise? Suddenly, a thought came to my mind. This entity is made of sound. Sound is its power. They've been tested by sound. They've been bound by sound. But what is the greatest enemy of sound? Silence. Doctor, there was a saying in Samus file. The hospital is making its own noise. What if we turn off all the recordings, all the machines here, and throw the hospital into complete silence? Will they be able to bear it? Or will a storm arise, and everything will collapse together? I slowly put my finger on the stop button on the recorder. The voice seemed to sense it. If you turn it off, we will disappear again. We will be trapped inside the wall again. Tasneem will never be able to talk to you again. The last word was tearing my heart apart. Yet I knew to some extent that if I believed this entity, I would just become another test subject. T13 perhaps. T13, Nefis Sadman, adult host. Will I be that? Brother, please. That word please broke everything in me. I kept torn between the children's begging and the entity's reckoning. But then suddenly, Uncle Tufik, who was standing next to me, reached out and grabbed my recorder. There was a strange stillness in his eyes that I hadn't seen since he arrived. I made this mistake 10 years ago, he said solemnly. No one dared to turn off the recorder then. That's why there was a fire and so many people died. I won't let that mistake happen again. He quickly pressed the stop button on the recorder. In a split second, all the sounds inside the hospital stopped in an instant. Chapter 10, The Explosion of Silence and the End of the Night. It didn't just stop. The silence seemed to explode in our ears. The low-level sound of the wind, the hum of the distant transformer, the flow of water in the pipes. These were the normal filtered noises that had been present before. All of them were cut off at once. It was as if someone had pressed the universal mute button. At first, I thought that something was wrong with my ears, that my hearing was suddenly going away. But Mahi and Rudra simultaneously covered their ears with their hands and shouted. There was no sound in their mouths, yet I could understand what they were trying to say. Uncle Tawfiq also opened his mouth to say something, but no sound came out. The silence had become so thick that it seemed that this silence itself was a sound, a high-frequency sound, inaudible to the ears, but like white noise burning in the brain. I lost my balance and bumped into the wall of the file room. Some files fell from the shelf. Even the sound of reading papers was gone. Everything was just a silent visual event. Just then, I saw. The shadows in the corridor began to tremble strangely. The shadow of a little child, which had floated in the dim light, was now slowly blurring, as if someone was erasing the lines with an eraser. At the same time, patches of darkness were gathering on the walls of the corridor, as if something trapped inside was trying to escape as steam, but was stuck because there was no sound. There was only one feeling inside my head, an indescribable scream that could not escape, though it echoed inside. This excessive pressure of silence was breaking our brains. Then, somewhere in the distance, a door closed with a loud sound. We did not hear the sound, but we understood it by the tremor of the ground, the shaking of the walls. One after another, on the upper floors, in the operating theater in the children's ward, all the doors, windows, and metal frames were slamming shut together, as if the hospital itself was sealing itself inside. Now, a very strange scene is before my eyes. Something black and smoky is coming out through small cracks in the plaster of the wall. And then it collapses again in an instant, as if they cannot survive because they have no voice, no sound. I understood the being which is made of sound cannot survive in silence. Their screams, their whispers, their cries, these are their driving force. We stopped all the machines, all the recordings, and suffocated their existence. Suddenly, a light tingle sounded in my left ear. I could hear the sounds of our own real world again. The sound of Maher gasping, the sound of Rudra coughing, Uncle Tufik's Astaghfirullah. The impossible pressure of silence is gradually decreasing, but the world of broken sounds that follows is not the same as before. I felt that the hospital was now stable, very quiet. Like after a death, a strange silence descends on everything, something like that. Somewhere in the distance, very faintly, a child's voice came, very quiet this time, no fear. "Brother, no more noise. Can I sleep?" Tears rolled down my face silently. I said softly, "Yes, Tasneem, sleep. No one will force you to listen to anything anymore." This time there was no answer. The thick darkness spread around us like a silent light. "Come on," Uncle Tofik said gravely. "We have to leave now." Leave the hospital in its silence. We watched as they came up from the basement. The corridors were more isolated than before. There was sound, but very normal, small pieces of plaster falling from the walls, the slight sway of signboards in the wind, the faint hum of the distant city. No child's laughter, no invisible sound of a wheelchair, no calling by name. As I passed the pediatric ward, I glanced over it. The swing was still. The air inside the cage is silent. As I pass the operating theater, I pick up the recorder on the table. The screen says only "re-CSTOPP'd." There is no other strange name. As I walk through the main corridor of the hospital to the gate, the dim light of the tube lights seems to have settled a little. As I approach the gate, it seems that this building is truly abandoned now, a dead body. The last of the infection has been drained from it. Outside, I hear the night sky, the light of the cold wind and the distant sounds of the city. Car horns, people screaming and dogs barking. All of this seems precious now, as if we have come out of a dead silence and returned to the hustle and bustle of life. As we stand in front of the microbus, Rudra suddenly smiles, a tired, tense smile. "Do you know what we are recording today? This footage, this sound, we may never be able to use it all in a movie. People will not believe it." I lowered my eyes and held the recorder tightly, saying, "Maybe it's better to use less in movies. Some stories are not good to be heard in their entirety. Some words are better left in silence." Mahdi said as she got into the car, "But your sister, do you think she's at peace now?" I remained silent for a while and said, "I may never get proof that she's at peace. But I know one thing, the words she feared for so long, the words the doctors used as weapons against her, are now silenced. Maybe that's enough." We got into the car. As soon as the engine started, I heard those familiar sounds, the vibration of the machine, the spinning of the wheels, the light click of the dashboard, and it felt like the world had returned to its normal sound design. But as the car started moving with the headphones hanging around my neck, I heard a very faint voice, faint like a memory, almost imaginary, in a very small voice close to my right ear. "Bye, you finally listened to me. Now I'm going to sleep." I laughed, a painful, strangely liberated laugh. I didn't see if the sound of this laugh was even captured on my recorder. The hospital gradually grew smaller behind. The darkness of the night swallowed it. We moved on. But I know somewhere inside me the corridors of that hospital, the basement file room, the swing room, everything is now embedded as sound. When I design the sound for the next movie, when I create the ambience of a corridor, when I add the sound of distant bare feet, I will know that some part of it is true. And the day someone sits in the theater and watches that movie to the end, listening to it through headphones all night long, maybe that day the silent walls of the hospital will shake a little again. Let us know how you like today's story in the comment box. Our team has to work hard to collect this story, so please give it a like and share it with your friends. If you like the story, don't forget to subscribe.